The sound of my wife's voice drifted through the thin walls of our house at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, and what I heard made me set down my sandpaper mid-stroke on the antique oak table I was restoring. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Of course I won't take his last name. It sounds absolutely cheap. I'd rather be Talia Sloan forever than a Grant for even a second. I stood frozen in my workshop doorway, dust motes dancing in the harsh fluorescent light. 20 years of marriage, and apparently my family name, the same name that built half the custom furniture in this godforsaken Rust Belt town, wasn't good enough for my wife's social climbing aspirations. Good thing I hadn't gotten around to embroidering her initials on those anniversary towels yet. My name is Elias Grant, and I make furniture the way my grandfather did, the way his father did. Real wood, real joints, real craftsmanship. Nothing fake, nothing cheap, nothing mass-produced. Unlike my marriage, apparently. I crept closer to the kitchen, where Talia was pacing in her silk pajamas, phone pressed to her ear like she was negotiating a hostage situation instead of planning whatever social event was consuming her life this week. Drew understands my vision, she continued, her voice taking on that breathy quality I used to find attractive. He gets that I need to maintain my professional image. The Sloan name has weight in this business. Drew Franklin. My former friend, my former drinking buddy, my former best man. Now apparently my wife's confidant in matters of nominal importance. The irony wasn't lost on me that the woman who wouldn't take my cheap last name was married to a man whose hands had built furniture for 3 generations of this town's elite. But then again, Talia had always preferred the shiny surface to the solid foundation. I retreated to my workshop, where the smell of wood stain and honest sweat made more sense than whatever perfumed poison was seeping through my house. The antique table stared back at me, its grain telling stories of trees that had weathered storms for decades before becoming something beautiful and lasting, unlike some things in my life. The next morning brought the kind of gray October sky that made our mid-sized Michigan town look like a Stephen King novel waiting to happen. I was loading a custom dining set into my truck when Mrs. Henderson from next door materialized at her fence like a suburban oracle of doom. "Morning, Elias," she called, her voice carrying that particular tone that meant she had gossip to share. "Saw Talia leave awful early today. All dressed up too?" I paused, a chair leg balanced on my shoulder. Event planning keeps her busy. "Oh, I'm sure it does." Mrs. Henderson's smile could have cut glass. "That's a demanding profession. All those late meetings and weekend conferences." The chair leg suddenly felt heavier. "What are you getting at, Dorothy?" "Nothing at all. Just making conversation." She turned to water her already drowning petunias. "Though I did notice that nice Tesla parked at the Riverside Motel yesterday. Same color as that business coach friend of yours. What's his name? Drew something." My hands tightened on the furniture. The Riverside Motel sat on the outskirts of town like a neon-signed monument to poor decisions and extramarital activities. It was the kind of place where people went when they wanted to be seen, not being seen. "Drew Franklin," I said carefully. "That's the one. Handsome fellow. Very professional-looking." I loaded the rest of the furniture in silence while Mrs. Henderson hummed and watered her plants with the satisfaction of someone who just lit a very long fuse. Back in my workshop that afternoon, I tried to focus on the mahogany bookshelf I was building for the library, but my hands kept slipping on the tools. Every joint felt wrong, every measurement off by fractions that might as well have been miles. Finally, I gave up and did what any rational man would do when his world started tilting sideways. I went looking for evidence. Talia's purse sat on the kitchen counter, designer leather that cost more than most people's rent. I'd never violated her privacy before, but then again, she'd never made me question 20 years of my life before either. The hotel receipt was tucked behind her credit cards like a guilty secret trying to hide. Riverside Motel, room 237. Yesterday's date. 4 hours that coincided exactly with the time she'd claimed to be at a vendor meeting across town. But it was her phone that delivered the final blow. The text messages between Talia and Drew read like a romance novel written by someone with no imagination and even less shame. I scrolled through weeks of exchanges, each message another nail in the coffin of my marriage. Drew: "Can't stop thinking about yesterday. You're incredible." Talia: "Elias is working late again. We could meet at the usual place." Drew: "Your husband has no idea what he has. His loss is my gain." Talia: "He's so focused on his little wood projects, like he's stuck in the past." My little wood projects. 20 years of building a business, of creating things that would outlast us all, and she called them little wood projects. I set the phone down with hands that shook only slightly. The kitchen felt different now, like a stage set for a play I'd never auditioned for. Even the custom cabinets I'd built seemed to mock me with their solid, dependable presence. The sound of a car in the driveway sent me scrambling to replace everything exactly as I'd found it. Talia breezed through the front door with the kind of energy that came from getting away with something. "How was your day, honey?" she asked, kissing my cheek with lips that had probably been places I didn't want to think about. "Productive," I said. "Finished the Morrison dining set. Started the library bookshelf." "That's nice." She was already moving away, her attention scattered. "I might be late tomorrow. Big client meeting." "Anyone I know?" "Just some business development stuff. Nothing exciting." "Nothing exciting." "Right." That night, I lay in bed listening to Talia's breathing and planning my next move. The smart thing would be to confront her, demand explanations, maybe suggest counseling. The mature thing would be to file for divorce quietly and divide our assets like civilized adults. But 20 years of marriage had taught me that sometimes the smart thing and the satisfying thing were two very different creatures, and Drew Franklin's Tesla was about to learn the difference. The next evening found me parked across the street from the Riverside Motel, feeling like a discount private investigator in a made-for-TV movie. The Tesla sat in the parking lot like a chrome-plated middle finger, all sleek lines and environmental righteousness. I'd brought tools. Not the good ones, I wasn't completely stupid, but a key, a screwdriver, and a bag of frozen shrimp from the grocery store could accomplish more than most people realized. The key work was artistic, long, deliberate scratches along both sides of the car, spelling out words that would make Drew's insurance adjuster blush. The screwdriver helped me locate the air intake vents, and the shrimp, well, let's just say Michigan in October was warm enough to start the fermentation process, but cool enough to make it last. I left a note under the windshield wiper. "Your taste is as cheap as your ride, e.g." Subtle? No. Satisfying? Absolutely. The drive home felt like the first deep breath I'd taken in weeks. For the first time since discovering Talia's extracurricular activities, I felt like myself again. Not the cuckolded husband, not the small-town furniture maker whose wife was embarrassed by his name. Just Elias Grant, a man who didn't take shit from Tesla-driving business coaches who couldn't coach their way out of a paper bag. That feeling lasted exactly 12 hours. "Elias Grant, you get out here right now!" Dorothy Henderson's voice cut through my morning coffee like a chainsaw through balsa wood. I opened the front door to find half the neighborhood gathered on my lawn, all staring at their phones with expressions ranging from amusement to horror. "You want to explain this?" Dorothy shoved her phone in my face. The video was crystal clear, thanks to modern technology and my complete lack of foresight. There I was in living color, methodically vandalizing Drew's car while the motel's security camera captured every moment of my artistic expression. "Neighborhood Watch Facebook group," read the caption. "Local man loses it at Riverside Motel." The comments were already pouring in. "Isn't that Talia Grant's husband?" "What was he doing at the Riverside?" "My cousin works there. Says this happens more than you'd think." Poor man. Everyone knows about his wife and that business coach. Everyone knows. The 4 words that could turn a man's private humiliation into public entertainment. "Well," Dorothy demanded, "what do you have to say for yourself?" I looked at the crowd of neighbors, their faces bright with the kind of excitement that only came from witnessing someone else's life implode in real time. "I'd say Drew Franklin needs better parking habits," I replied, then closed the door. But the damage was done. By noon, the video had spread beyond our neighborhood Facebook group to the broader community pages. By evening, it had reached the business networks where both Talia and Drew operated. My phone rang constantly. Reporters from the local paper wanting a statement, friends asking if I was okay, potential customers suddenly remembering they didn't need custom furniture after all. And through it all, Talia maintained radio silence. She didn't come home that night, or the next. On Friday, I found myself at Murphy's Gym, the kind of place where the equipment was older than some of the members and the air conditioning was more of a suggestion than a promise. I'd been boxing here since high school, back when hitting things was recreation instead of therapy. "You look like hell," observed Tommy Murphy, the gym's owner and my unofficial life coach for the past 25 years. Tommy had the build of a man who'd spent decades teaching other people how to fight, and the wisdom of someone who'd learned when not to. "Feel worse," I admitted, wrapping my hands with more force than necessary. "Saw the video? Nice work on the Tesla." "You're the first person to call it nice work." "Well, I appreciate craftsmanship." Tommy held the heavy bag steady while I worked out my frustrations on its leather surface. "Question is, what's your next move?" "Haven't decided yet." Might want to decide fast. Word is, your wife's been telling people you're unstable. Dangerous, even. My fist stopped mid-swing. What? Dorothy Henderson's been talking. Says Talia's scared to come home. Says you've been making threats. I haven't made any threats. I know that. You know that. But half the town's already convicted you based on a 30-second video. Tommy's expression was grim. You need to get ahead of this story before it gets ahead of you. That afternoon, I drove to Talia's office at Sloan Events, the upscale event planning firm she'd built from nothing into something that impressed the kind of people who needed to be impressed by such things. The receptionist, a young woman named Jessica, who'd always been friendly, looked at me like I might start vandalizing the furniture. Is Talia available? I asked. She's in a meeting. With Drew Franklin? Jessica's face flushed. I really can't. It's okay, Jess. Talia appeared in the doorway of her office, looking polished and professional and completely unbothered by the fact that her marriage was dissolving in public. Elias, what are you doing here? We need to talk. I don't think that's a good idea. Not after your episode. Episode. Like 20 years of marriage could be dismissed as a mental health crisis. My episode? You mean finding out my wife is screwing my former best friend? The office went quiet. Jessica suddenly found her computer screen fascinating. Lower your voice, Talia hissed. This is my workplace. Right. Wouldn't want to damage your professional reputation. God knows that's more important than our marriage. Our marriage was over long before Drew came into the picture. You were just too buried in your workshop to notice. The words hit harder than Tommy's heavy bag ever could, because somewhere in the venom, there was a grain of truth that made everything worse. So this is my fault? This is nobody's fault. People grow apart. I need someone who understands my ambitions, who can match my energy. Drew gets that. Drew's a con artist who sells overpriced seminars to desperate people. Drew's a successful entrepreneur who's helped dozens of businesses grow. He sees potential where others see problems. What potential does he see in a married woman? Talia's composure cracked for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. He sees a woman who's tired of being held back by a man who thinks success is measured in wood shavings. I stared at her, this person I'd shared a bed with for 2 decades, and realized I was looking at a stranger. Maybe I always had been. Fine, I said. But I'm not disappearing quietly. This is my town, too. Actually, Talia's smile was sharp as winter. Drew thinks it might be better for everyone if you took some time away, maybe visited your sister in Arizona. Let things cool down, Drew thinks. Not I think, or we think, but Drew thinks. My wife was taking marital advice from the man she was cheating with. Drew can think whatever he wants from the driver's seat of his vandalized car. I turned to leave, but Talia's voice stopped me. Elias, the locks have been changed. Don't bother going home. The parking lot felt like a movie set, all bright sunshine and normal people doing normal things, while my world rearranged itself into something unrecognizable. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, watching office workers grab lunch and run errands, and wondered when I'd become the crazy person other people cross the street to avoid. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the video. We need to talk. Drew. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, Murphy's Gym. 1 hour. Come alone. His response was immediate. I don't think that's wise. Probably not. Come anyway. Drew Franklin arrived at Murphy's Gym looking like he'd dressed for a hostile corporate takeover rather than a conversation in a boxing gym. His suit probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and his shoes had the kind of shine that suggested he'd never walked anywhere more challenging than a parking lot. He also had a black eye that makeup couldn't quite hide. Nice shiner, I observed, continuing to wrap my hands. Tesla door slam back at you? Very funny. Drew's voice carried the kind of forced confidence that came from reading too many self-help books. We need to discuss this situation like adults. Adults don't usually screw their friends' wives. Your marriage was already over, Elias. Talia and I just found each other. Found each other. Right, at the Riverside Motel. Very romantic. Drew shifted uncomfortably, his expensive shoes squeaking against the gym's worn rubber flooring. The place was mostly empty, just a few regulars who pretended not to watch while clearly hanging on every word. Look, Drew continued, I didn't come here to fight. I came to offer you a way out of this mess with your dignity intact. My dignity intact? That's rich coming from a guy who coaches people on business success while banging married women in cheap motels. Talia deserves better than what you've given her. She's brilliant, ambitious, capable of so much more than planning small-town events. I can help her reach her potential. And what potential is that? Trophy wife to a discount Tony Robbins? Drew's carefully maintained composure cracked. You have no idea what you're talking about. I've built a successful consulting business from nothing. I help people transform their lives. You help people transform their bank accounts into your bank account. There's a difference. At least I'm not stuck in the past, making furniture like it's 1950. I stopped wrapping my hands and looked at him. Really looked at him. Drew Franklin, who used to drink beer and watch football games in my living room, who'd been my best man when I married Talia, who'd borrowed money from me 3 times over the years and paid it back twice. You know what the difference is between you and me, Drew? Enlighten me. When I build something, it lasts. When you build something, it falls apart the moment people stop paying attention. Is that supposed to be profound? It's supposed to be true. Drew laughed, but it sounded forced. Truth? You want truth? Here's truth. Talia hasn't been happy in years. She's been going through the motions, playing the dutiful wife while dying inside. I didn't steal her from you. I rescued her. Rescued her from what? From a life of mediocrity. From a husband who thinks the height of ambition is getting written up in the local paper for building someone's kitchen cabinets. The words stung, because they contained just enough truth to hurt. I had been content with my small-town success, my local reputation, my steady business. I'd never wanted to conquer the world, just my little corner of it. So what's the offer? I asked. Drew straightened his tie, back in his element now that we were talking business. Simple, uncontested divorce. You keep the workshop and whatever tools you want. Talia keeps the house and her business. Clean break, no drama, no more public scenes. And if I don't agree? Then things get complicated. Talia's already documented your unstable behavior. The vandalism, the threats. What threats? The ones you made when you confronted her at the office. Jessica heard everything. I stared at him. I never threatened anyone. That's not how witnesses remember it. And if this goes to court, if it gets uglier, well, judges tend to side with the victim. The victim. Talia, who'd been cheating on me for months, was now the victim. You son of a bitch. I'm trying to help you here, Elias. Take the deal. Move on with your life. Find someone who appreciates whatever it is you have to offer. Something inside me snapped. Not broke, snapped. Like a rubber band stretched too far, too fast. I dropped my hand wraps and walked toward Drew. He took a step back, bumping into a weight bench. You want to know what I have to offer? I asked quietly. Elias? I grabbed Drew by his expensive lapels and shoved him against the wall. Not hard enough to hurt him, but hard enough to make my point. I offered 20 years of loyalty to a woman who threw it away for a discount life coach. I offered friendship to a man who repaid it by screwing my wife. I offered to handle this quietly, and you turned it into a public humiliation. You're proving my point about being unstable. I'm not unstable. I'm angry. There's a difference. I released him and stepped back. Drew straightened his suit with shaking hands. This isn't over, he said. No, I agreed. It's not. After Drew left, I sat on the bench and stared at my reflection in the gym's cracked mirror. The man looking back at me was 41 years old, graying at the temples, with calloused hands and laugh lines that seemed inappropriate given the circumstances. I looked like what I was, a small-town craftsman whose biggest concerns should have been lumber prices and delivery schedules. Instead, I was planning the systematic destruction of 2 people's lives. The thought should have bothered me more than it did. Tommy appeared beside me with 2 bottles of water. Heard most of that. And that boy's running scared. Men like him, they're all confidence and bluster until someone calls their bluff. He's got Talia convinced I'm dangerous. Are you? I considered the question. Was I dangerous? I'd never hurt anyone, never even been in a real fight since high school. But something had changed in me over the past week. Something fundamental had shifted. I might be. Tommy nodded like that was the answer he'd expected. Good. Dangerous men get results. Just make sure you're dangerous smart, not dangerous stupid. What's the difference? Dangerous stupid ends up in jail. Dangerous smart ends up winning. That night, I drove past my own house, my former house, and saw lights on in every window. Talia's car was in the driveway next to Drew's newly repaired Tesla. They weren't even trying to hide anymore. I parked across the street and watched them move around inside like actors on a stage. Talia gestured animatedly while Drew nodded and sipped what was probably my good whiskey. They looked comfortable together, natural in a way that made me question whether anything about my marriage had been real. My phone rang. The caller ID showed my daughter's name. Dad? Maddie's voice sounded small and far away. She was a freshman at State, majoring in something that changed every semester and costing me a fortune I could no longer afford. Hey, sweetheart, how are classes going? Dad, what's happening? Mom called and said, she said you've been acting crazy, that you attacked some guy. I closed my eyes. Of course, Talia had gotten to Maddie first. Of course, she'd shaped the narrative before I had a chance to explain. It's complicated, honey. Are you and Mom getting divorced? The question hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. How do you explain to your 18-year-old daughter that her mother is a cheating opportunist and her father is planning revenge that might destroy what's left of their family? Maybe, probably. Because of what you did? Because of what we both did and didn't do. Mom says you need help, professional help. Professional help. Like my marriage was a business problem that could be solved with the right consultant. Your mother says a lot of things. Dad, you're scaring me. I looked at the house where I'd lived for 15 years, where I'd built custom shelves and refinished floors and fixed every broken thing except the most important one. I'm not going to hurt anyone, Maddie, I promise you that. But you're going to hurt Mom. Smart girl. Too smart for her own good sometimes. Your mom hurt herself. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. That's not the same thing, isn't it? The line went quiet for a long moment. When Maddie spoke again, her voice was different, older. I love you, Dad, but I think you should talk to someone, a counselor or something, before this gets worse. It's already worse, sweetheart. It's been worse for months. I'm just catching up. After we hung up, I sat in my truck and watched my wife and her lover play house in my former home. The smart thing would be to drive away, find a lawyer, start the divorce process like a civilized adult, but I'd tried Smart. Smart had gotten me a vandalism video on Facebook and a reputation as the town's latest cautionary tale. It was time to try something else. The Riverside Motel's neon sign flickered against the October sky like a broken promise, casting pink and blue shadows across the parking lot where my marriage had officially died. I sat in my truck, engine running, and watched Drew's Tesla pull into the same spot where I'd performed my amateur automotive surgery a week earlier. Room 237, same as always. 10 minutes later, Talia's BMW joined the Tesla, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger anymore. Anger was hot and immediate. This was something else, something patient and calculating. I waited until they were inside, then walked to the motel office. The desk clerk was a kid who couldn't have been older than 25, all tattoos and boredom and the kind of world-weary expression that came from seeing too much of humanity's worst impulses. "Help you?" he asked without looking up from his phone. "Yeah, I need to report a noise complaint. Room 237. Now he looked up. "What kind of noise?" "The kind that's disturbing other guests. Loud voices, banging around, that sort of thing." The kid sighed and reached for the phone. "I'll call and ask them to keep it down." "Actually," I said, sliding a $50 bill across the counter, "I was thinking more along the lines of you going up there personally, maybe bringing a manager, making sure everything's appropriate." The kid looked at the money, then at me, and his expression shifted into something resembling understanding. "You know," he said, pocketing the bill, "I've been getting complaints about that room. Might need to do a wellness check, make sure everything's up to code." "That's very responsible of you." "I try to run a quality establishment." I waited in my truck while the kid, whose name tag read Kyle, walked up the exterior stairs to the second floor. Through the thin walls and cheaper windows, I could hear raised voices as Kyle knocked and explained that he needed to inspect the room for noise violations. The argument that followed was loud enough to hear from the parking lot. Drew's voice, angry and entitled, "This is harassment. I know my rights." Kyle, bored but persistent. Sir, I need to verify the room occupancy. Hotel policy." Talia, trying to salvage the situation. "We were just having a business meeting." Kyle, clearly enjoying himself now. "Ma'am, our business center is downstairs. This is a sleeping room." It went on for 10 minutes, with Kyle methodically documenting everything he saw for his incident report. By the time Drew and Talia emerged from the room, they looked like they'd been caught shoplifting by their Sunday school teacher. I started my truck and drove away, whistling. The next morning brought a phone call from Jessica at Talia's office. "Mr. Grant, I'm so sorry to bother you, but there's been a situation." "What kind of situation?" "Someone sent photos to Mrs. Sloane's biggest client. Pictures of her and Mr. Franklin at a motel. The client is threatening to cancel their contract." I made appropriate sounds of concern while internally calculating the financial impact. The Riverside Motel photos would cost Talia her most lucrative account, a society wedding that represented nearly 30% of her annual revenue. That's terrible, Jessica. Any idea who might have done such a thing? No, sir. The email was anonymous. But Mrs. Sloane thinks. She thinks it might have been you. Why would I sabotage my wife's business? I don't know, sir. She asked me to call and warn you that she's considering legal action. Legal action. Right. Because nothing said innocent victim, like threatening to sue the person who'd exposed your adultery. Thanks for the heads up, Jessica. And Jessica, you might want to start looking for another job. Sir, trust me on this one. I hung up and immediately called my lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in divorce cases and had the personality of a prosecuting attorney with caffeine poisoning. Elias, I was wondering when I'd hear from you. Half the town's talking about your situation. I need to file for divorce, today. Good. What grounds? Adultery. I have photos, text messages, hotel receipts, and witness statements. Excellent. What about assets? She can have the house. I want the workshop, my tools, and my truck. Everything else we can split. That's very reasonable. Almost suspiciously reasonable. I'm a reasonable man, Patricia. No, you're not. You're a man with a plan. What aren't you telling me? I smiled. Patricia knew me too well. Nothing illegal. Nothing that will get you disbarred. Nothing that will put me in jail. But something. Something. Patricia was quiet for a moment. I don't want to know, do I? Probably not. Fine. I'll file the papers this afternoon. But Elias? Whatever you're planning, make sure it's worth it. Revenge is expensive. So is letting people walk all over you. After hanging up with Patricia, I drove to the college where I'd been building custom shelving for the library renovation. The head librarian, a woman named Chloe Rivera, had become something of a friend over the past month. She appreciated craftsmanship, understood the difference between real wood and particle board, and had the kind of quiet intelligence that made conversations feel like discoveries. She was also beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or designer clothes. You look like a man with news, she said when I walked into the library. I filed for divorce today. Chloe set down her coffee and gave me her full attention. How do you feel? Like I should have done it months ago. Any regrets? I thought about the question seriously. Did I regret 20 years of marriage? The house we'd built together, the daughter we'd raised, the 1,000 small compromises that had seemed like love at the time? I regret not seeing it coming. I regret trusting people who didn't deserve it. I regret letting other people define my worth. But not the marriage itself? The marriage ended a long time ago. I just made it official today. Chloe nodded like that made perfect sense. What's next? Next, I stop playing defense and start playing offense. That sounds ominous. It's going to be educational. That afternoon, I put my plan into motion. First, I called every vendor Talia used for her events. Caterers, florists, photographers, musicians. I'd met most of them over the years at various functions, and they knew me as the reliable husband who helped set up tables and move equipment. Hey, Mike, it's Elias Grant. Yeah, Talia's husband. Listen, I need to ask you a favor. Talia and I are getting divorced, and things are getting ugly. She's been telling people I'm dangerous, unstable. I just wanted you to hear my side before she tries to turn you against me. The conversation was the same with each vendor. I played the wounded husband, the victim of a cheating wife and her manipulative lover. I shared just enough detail to make them uncomfortable, the hotel receipts, the lies, the way Talia had tried to frame me as mentally unstable. By the end of the day, half of Talia's professional network had heard my version of events. The second phase involved Drew's business. Drew Franklin's coaching operation was built on image and testimonials from satisfied clients. He sold expensive seminars to desperate business owners, promising to transform their companies through revolutionary mindset shifts and paradigm-breaking strategies. It was all bullshit, but it was profitable bullshit. I spent the evening researching Drew's background, using public records and social media to piece together his history. What I found was fascinating. 3 failed businesses, 2 bankruptcies, and a pattern of leaving town whenever his schemes collapsed. Drew Franklin wasn't even his real name. He'd been born Andrew Frankovich in Cleveland, where he'd left behind a trail of angry investors and unpaid debts. I compiled everything into a detailed report and sent it to the Better Business Bureau, the State Attorney General's office, and every business journal in the region. I also created anonymous social media accounts and began posting the information on local business forums. The third phase was more personal. Talia had always been proud of her family history, her connection to the old money families that had built our town in the 19th century. She'd spent years researching her genealogy, creating elaborate family trees that she displayed at dinner parties. It had taken me exactly one afternoon at the county records office to discover that most of her family history was fiction. The Sloane family she claimed to descend from had indeed been prominent, but Talia's actual ancestors were their servants, not their relatives. Her great-great-grandfather hadn't been a successful merchant. He'd been a stable hand. Her family hadn't owned land. They'd worked other people's land. There was nothing shameful about honest work, but there was something deeply embarrassing about lying about it for 20 years. I printed copies of the real records and mailed them anonymously to everyone on Talia's social media friends list, along with copies of her fabricated family tree. By Friday, my phone was ringing constantly. "Elias, what the hell is going on?" It was my brother-in-law, Talia's sister's husband. "Karen's getting all these documents about Talia's family. Says they prove she's been lying about everything." "I wouldn't know anything about that, Mike. This is getting out of hand. Talia's having some kind of breakdown. She's convinced you're stalking her." "I'm not stalking anyone. I'm just making sure the truth comes out." "This isn't like you." "Maybe this is exactly like me. Maybe you just never saw it before." The calls continued throughout the weekend. Friends, neighbors, business associates. Everyone wanted to know what was happening, whose side they should take, whether the stories they were hearing could possibly be true. I answered every call with the same calm, reasonable tone. I expressed sadness about my marriage ending, concern for Talia's mental state, and hope that we could all move forward with dignity and honesty. I never admitted to anything. I never denied anything either. By Sunday night, Talia and Drew had become the town's favorite scandal, and I had become the sympathetic victim of their betrayal. It was exactly what I'd wanted. But it was only the beginning. The Lakeside Manor had been booked for months. Talia had described it as the wedding of the season, a society event that would cement her reputation as the region's premier event planner. The bride was a judge's daughter, the groom was from old money, and everyone who mattered in our small city would be in attendance. It was also supposed to be Talia's comeback event, the job that would restore her credibility after the motel scandal and prove that she could rise above personal drama to deliver professional excellence. Instead, it became the stage for the final act of my revenge. I arrived at Lakeside Manor at 2 p.m, 3 hours before the ceremony. I wasn't invited, of course, but I'd done work for the venue over the years. Custom bars, decorative panels, emergency repairs. And the staff knew me as a reliable contractor who could fix anything. "Elias!" The venue manager, a harried woman named Susan, looked relieved to see me. "Thank God you're here. We have a situation." "What kind of situation?" "The wedding arch collapsed this morning. Just fell apart during setup. The bride's father is furious, Talia's running around like a crazy person, and we need something to replace it in the next 2 hours." I walked over to examine the wreckage. The arch had been rented from a discount supplier. Cheap materials, poor construction, designed to look good in photos, but not to actually support the weight of flowers and fabric. "I can build you something," I said, "but it'll cost extra for the rush job." "Whatever it takes. The judge is talking about suing everyone involved." I spent the next hour constructing a simple but elegant arch from materials I kept in my truck for emergency repairs. Nothing fancy, but solid and functional, the kind of work that would last long after the photos were forgotten. While I worked, I watched Talia coordinate with vendors, manage the setup, and handle the 1,000 small crises that came with high-end events. She was good at her job, I had to admit. Maybe not as good as she thought she was, but competent enough. She was also falling apart. The past 2 weeks had taken their toll. Her clothes were wrinkled, her makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes, and she moved with the frantic energy of someone running on caffeine and desperation. Drew, meanwhile, was nowhere to be seen. "Where's your business partner?" I asked Jessica, who was helping coordinate the setup. "Mr. Franklin? He's not available today." "Not available?" Jessica lowered her voice. "His business license got suspended. Something about fraudulent credentials. He's meeting with lawyers." I nodded sympathetically while internally celebrating. The state investigation I'd triggered was moving faster than expected. By 4:30, the guests were arriving and the venue was transformed. My arch stood at the center of it all, draped in white silk and covered with flowers, looking like it had been planned from the beginning. The bride was beautiful, the groom was nervous, and the judge's family was satisfied that their money had been well spent. It should have been Talia's triumph. Instead, it became her nightmare. I waited until the ceremony began, then made my move. The venue's sound system was controlled from a booth overlooking the main hall. I'd installed the wiring 2 years earlier, so I knew exactly how to access it. The technician was outside smoking, the booth was unlocked, and everyone's attention was focused on the bride and groom. I plugged my phone into the audio system and waited for the perfect moment. The minister was asking if anyone objected to the union when my voice filled the hall through the speakers. I object to lies. I object to betrayal. I object to people who build their happiness on other people's pain. The recording I'd made that morning was crystal clear, projected through professional speakers to an audience of 300 people, but it wasn't my voice that made them gasp. It was Talia's. "He's so pathetic," her recorded voice said. 20 years of marriage to a small-town nobody who thinks building furniture makes him important. Drew's worth 10 of him. The recording was from a phone conversation I'd intercepted using techniques that weren't entirely legal, but were completely effective. Talia and her sister discussing the divorce, my reputation, and her plans for the future. "The best part is, everyone feels sorry for me," Talia's voice continued. "Poor Talia, married to an unstable man who can't accept that she's outgrown him. They have no idea I've been planning this for months." The wedding guests sat in stunned silence as the recording played on. Talia's voice filled the hall, describing her affair with Drew, her manipulation of the narrative, and her plans to take everything in the divorce. "I'll get the house, the business, and probably alimony. He's too stupid to fight back effectively. By Christmas, I'll be free and rich and finally able to live the life I deserve." I watched from the sound booth as Talia frantically searched for the source of the audio. Her face had gone white, then red, then white again. She looked like someone watching her own execution. The recording ended with the most damning part, Talia laughing about my little wood projects, and wondering how long it would take me to crawl back and beg for forgiveness. The silence that followed was deafening. Then the judge's wife stood up. "I think," she said in a voice that could cut glass, "we need to discuss whether this is the kind of person we want planning our family events." The exodus began immediately. Guests filed out of the hall in small groups, whispering among themselves and shooting disgusted looks at Talia. The bride's family looked mortified, the groom's family looked angry, and the bride herself was crying. Talia stood frozen at the center of it all, watching her professional reputation die in real time. I slipped out of the sound booth and walked calmly to my truck. No one stopped me, no one questioned me, no one even seemed to notice me. I was just the contractor who'd fixed the arch, invisible among the chaos. My phone rang as I drove away. "Elias." Patricia's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "What did you do?" "I attended a wedding." "You know what I mean. Half the town is calling me about some recording. I wouldn't know anything about that. This could complicate the divorce proceedings." "How? Everything on that recording was true." "That's not the point. If you obtained it illegally." "I didn't obtain anything illegally. If someone happened to record a phone conversation in a one-party consent state, that would be perfectly legal." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "You recorded your own wife?" "I recorded someone talking about me. What she chose to say was her decision." "Elias, this is justice, Patricia. For 20 years I played by the rules. I was faithful, honest, hardworking, and supportive. I built a business, raised a daughter, and tried to be the man everyone expected me to be. And it got me betrayed, humiliated, and nearly destroyed, so I stopped playing by their rules and started playing by mine." "What happens now?" I pulled into the parking lot of Murphy's gym, where Tommy was waiting with a beer and a satisfied smile. Now I start over. Clean slate, clear conscience, and a reputation as someone you don't want to cross. "And Talia?" I looked back toward the venue, where emergency vehicles were arriving and the chaos was probably just beginning. Talia's learning that actions have consequences. It's a lesson she should have learned a long time ago. The next morning, I woke up in my workshop apartment, a small space I'd built above the shop for late nights and early mornings. The sun was streaming through the windows, illuminating dust motes and wood shavings, and the tools that had been my grandfather's and his father's before him. My phone showed 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The local paper wanted a statement. The regional news wanted an interview. 3 different lawyers wanted to represent me in whatever legal battles might be coming. I deleted them all and made coffee instead. At 8 o'clock, there was a knock on the workshop door. I opened it to find Chloe Rivera holding a bag of pastries and wearing a smile that made the morning seem brighter. "I brought breakfast," she said, "and congratulations." "For what?" "For winning." I let her in, and we sat among the sawdust and half-finished projects, eating Danish pastries and drinking coffee while she told me about the aftermath of the wedding disaster. "Talia's business is finished," Chloe said. 3 clients canceled this morning, and the venue is talking about suing for damages. The bride's family is demanding a full refund. "And Drew?" "Arrested. Turns out the state investigation found evidence of actual fraud. not just misleading advertising. He'll probably do time. I nodded, feeling a satisfaction that was deeper than revenge and cleaner than anger. Any regrets? Chloe asked. I thought about it seriously. Did I regret destroying my wife's business, exposing her lies, humiliating her in front of everyone she'd tried to impress? No, I said. I regret that it took me so long to fight back. What's next? I looked around the workshop, at the tools and wood and half-finished projects that represented everything I'd built and everything I was. Next, I finished what I started. The bookshelf for the library, the dining table for the Johnsons, the cabinet for the mayor's office. That's it? That's everything. Good work, honest dealing, and a reputation that means something. Chloe smiled. And us? Us? Is there an us to think about? I looked at her, this intelligent, beautiful woman who appreciated craftsmanship and understood the difference between surface shine and solid construction. I'd like there to be. Good, because I've been thinking about commissioning some custom bookshelves for my house. I could probably help with that. I was hoping you'd say that. 3 months later, the divorce was final. Talia got the house, but it came with a mortgage she couldn't afford and a reputation that made it impossible to rebuild her business. She moved back to her mother's house and took a job managing events for a hotel chain. Drew got 18 months in minimum security prison and a lifetime ban from operating investment or consulting businesses in the state. I got my freedom, my workshop, and a new relationship with a woman who thought my last name was worth taking. The town got a story they'd be talking about for years. And I got something more valuable than revenge. I got my self-respect back. On a warm spring morning, I stood in my workshop putting the finishing touches on a dining table that would outlast everyone who'd ever sit at it. The wood was solid oak, the joints were perfect, and every surface had been sanded smooth and finished with care. It was honest work, built to last, created by a man whose name meant something again. Outside, I could hear the sounds of the town waking up. Cars starting, doors closing, people beginning their days with purpose and hope. I smiled and reached for my next piece of wood. There was always something new to build.